May 14th, 2025, Maple Creek, a small, unassuming town nestled in the green valleys of Oregon, awoke to a morning like any other. The scent of damp pine hung in the air. The distant rumble of the first logging trucks of the day echoed from the hills. But that profound peace was about to be irrevocably shattered by a single, dark stain. Frank Miller, a retired postal worker, followed his morning ritual with clockwork precision, a brisk walk, a bit of gardening. As he opened his front gate, his eyes caught on something wrong at the home of his neighbor, Arthur Hayes. A dark brown streak, dried and ugly, ran from the edge of the iron gate across the small concrete yard and stopped abruptly at the front doorstep. At first, Frank dismissed it as oil or mud from the recent rains. But as he drew closer, a faint coppery smell lingering in the damp morning air sent a chill down his spine. It was blood, a dried trail of blood. Frank's heart began to hammer against his ribs. The Hayes family was the picture of suburban tranquility. Arthur, a retired city planner, lived with his wife Eleanor, a beloved elementary school teacher, their two sons Samuel and Daniel, and Arthur's elderly father, 83-year-old Walter. A family of 5, their home usually filled with the sounds of a life well lived. But this morning, the house was silent, a deep, unnerving silence. Every door and window was shut tight. Frank called out a few times, "Arthur, Eleanor." There was no reply, only the dead quiet that seemed to press in on him from all sides. A cold dread washed over him. Frank fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed 911. The sheriff's department deputies arrived in minutes. The front gate was unlatched, but the main door was locked from the outside. A strange, unsettling detail. The lead detective, Miles Corbin, made the call to force entry. As the heavy wooden door swung inward, a horrific smell assaulted them. It was the thick, cloying odor of blood beginning to turn in the stale, lifeless air of the house. The scene inside was a tableau of absolute horror. All 5 members of the Hayes family were dead. They were found in different rooms of the house, each bearing fatal wounds. A wave of grim sorrow washed over even the most seasoned officers. But amidst the carnage, one thing stood out and chilled Detective Corbin to the bone. The neatness. The house showed no signs of being searched. Everything was in its proper place. The widescreen television, the laptops, the expensive electronics were all untouched. The closets were undisturbed. The household items were arranged with a tidiness that was utterly bizarre, as if their owner had just stepped out for a moment. There was no sign of a robbery gone wrong, no sign of a struggle. The crime seemed to have been committed in absolute, terrifying silence. It screamed of something other than a random act of violence. It screamed of a plan. In the middle of the living room floor, near the sofa, lay the first and only solid piece of physical evidence. A single, muddy shoe print, size 12. The tread had a distinctive, crisscrossing V-shaped pattern. The forensics team noted immediately that the mud was not from the garden or the yard surrounding the house. It was a darker, clay-like soil, the kind found at construction sites or the undeveloped lots on the outskirts of town. The print led from the front door into the living room and then vanished toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms. It was the ghostly footprint of an intruder who had walked into this home, delivered death, and then evaporated. On the wall, a grandfather clock had stopped. Its hands were frozen at 2:47 in the morning. The moment, perhaps, when time itself had ended for the Hayes family. Another detail reinforced the theory of a meticulously planned attack. The security camera mounted on the eaves of the front porch had been destroyed, not smashed, but professionally disabled. The wires were clipped with precision, and the recording device was gone, its data storage expertly removed or broken. Not a single frame of footage was left behind. Worse, as Corbin's team expanded their search, they discovered that the security cameras on neighboring houses, Cameras that might have captured the perpetrator's arrival or departure had also been disabled around the same time. The killer, or killers, not only knew the layout of the Hayes security system, they knew the coverage of the entire neighborhood. They knew exactly how to create a digital black hole around their crime before they even set foot on the property. Initial suspicion fell on the one person who wasn't there, Ethan Hayes, the family's 24-year-old eldest son. Ethan was a university student in Los Angeles and was not home on the night of the murders. The very next day, the LAPD made contact with him. When told the news, Ethan was audibly shocked, but his reaction was odd. He didn't break down. He didn't become hysterical. There was just a quiet, hollow numbness, an absence of strong emotion that planted a small seed of doubt in the minds of the investigators. Was it the profound shock that had paralyzed him, or was it something else? The uncanny neatness of the crime scene, the precise disabling of the cameras, and the specific shoe print led the investigators to a preliminary conclusion. The culprit had to be someone familiar with the family, with the house layout, and with their daily routines. This was not an impulsive crime. This was a premeditated massacre. But the motive remained a solid brick wall. With nothing stolen, the question of why became a fortress, repelling every theory the detectives could muster. The investigation stalled almost as soon as it began. A heavy, fearful silence fell over Maple Creek. 3 days after the slaughter, just as the investigation seemed to be going nowhere, a flicker of light appeared. A witness came forward. Mrs. Gloria Peterson, a 63-year-old woman who lived a few houses down the street. Mrs. Peterson was a notoriously light sleeper. On the night of the murder, at around 3 in the morning, she was woken by a strange sound. Footsteps. The sound of multiple people not walking but running. A frantic, hurried rhythm, as if they were fleeing from something terrible. Curious, Mrs. Peterson peered through her blinds. In the pale yellow glow of the streetlights, she saw 3 tall figures, dressed in dark, hooded clothing, sprinting down the lane. One of the 3 had a slightly hunched back, and their footsteps sounded heavier, more labored than the other 2. The time she gave, just before 3 a.m., corresponded almost perfectly with the time the clock in the Hayes home had stopped. Her testimony was an invaluable piece of the puzzle. It confirmed the killers were not a lone wolf, but a group, a team of at least 3. Another witness was soon found, Mike Sullivan, a security guard at a nearby construction site. Sullivan recalled seeing a person on a motorcycle, helmet on, waiting at the entrance to the alley that led to the Hayes' street. The person kept checking their watch, looking anxious as if waiting for someone. This suggested the group had a designated getaway driver, a lookout. Their plan was even more sophisticated than Corbin had initially imagined. Analysis of footage from a pharmacy's security camera, though it had also been disabled, managed to save the last few frames before the feed went black. The image was blurry, but it clearly showed 3 figures running out of the alley at 2:16 a.m. One of the figures had a stooped posture, moving with a familiarity of the terrain. The synchronized disabling of the camera at the Hayes house and the one at the pharmacy cemented the fact that this was a well-planned operation. The hypothesis was now solid. This group had likely been surveilling the Hayes family for some time. They knew everything, from the camera locations to the family's sleeping habits. But why? The Hayes family was an ordinary, middle-class family known for their kindness with no known enemies. Why would they become the target of what looked like a professional hit squad? The investigation pivoted to a new, more tedious front: digital forensics. The technical team began the painstaking process of analyzing all cell phone signals that had pinged the cell tower covering the Hayes neighborhood between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. on the morning of May 14th. 47 phone numbers were active in that window. Most belonged to local residents, their call logs showing nothing out of the ordinary. But one number stood out like a flare in the dark. It was a burner phone. The SIM card had been activated on the evening of May 13th, just hours before the murders, and it had been deactivated shortly after 3 a.m. on May 14th, just minutes after Mrs. Peterson heard the running footsteps. This phone had made only 3 calls, each lasting less than a minute. 2 of the calls could not be traced, but the third, the crucial one, was made to a landline number in a district of Los Angeles. The detectives traced the number. It belonged to a bar called the Starlight Lounge. At the same time, a piece of intelligence arrived from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in California that suddenly made the entire picture terrifyingly clear. They reported a suspicious finding at a motel in the Dixon district. The motel had rented rooms to 3 young men in early March. These men exhibited strange behavior. They always wore dark clothes, left late at night, and returned in the early hours of the morning. And they had checked out abruptly on the morning of May 14th, the very morning the Hayes family was found dead. The final critical piece of the puzzle fell into place. The last signal from the burner phone before it went dark was traced to that exact area in Dixon just a few hours after the murders in Oregon. All the clues now converged: Maple Creek, Oregon, Los Angeles, Riverside County. The case was no longer a local homicide. It was a multi-state conspiracy. Detective Corbin and his team now believed they were hunting a crew of killers who had traveled to Oregon, committed the murders, and then immediately scattered to cover their tracks. The Starlight Lounge in LA and the motel in Riverside were the 2 loose threads that could unravel Dlinaya Nit Vedushchaya K. Razgadke, this entire criminal network. A coordinated multi-state operation was launched immediately. In Riverside County, deputies canvassed motels in the Dixon area and quickly zeroed in on the one where the 3 suspects had stayed. A search of the room they had abandoned, though cleaned by staff, yielded a few overlooked items. Among them was a purchase receipt from a nearby convenience store. Security footage from that store gave the investigation its first clear look at the faces of the 3 men. Their appearances matched the general descriptions from the witnesses in Maple Creek. The faces of the killers were finally revealed. In Los Angeles, another team of detectives paid a visit to the Starlight Lounge. The owner confirmed that at the time the burner phone had called, a female employee, a waitress named Jessica Vargas, who went by Jessie, had used the bar's landline. This was highly suspicious. Immediately after May 14th, Jessie had called in to request an indefinite leave of absence, citing a family emergency. Her cell phone had been turned off ever since. Jessica Vargas was now a person of extreme interest. On May 18th, just 4 days after the crime, 2 of the 3 suspects were apprehended at another cheap motel in Riverside County. They were clearly laying low, waiting for the heat to die down before moving again. They were identified as Rick Bauer, 27, with a prior conviction for aggravated assault, and Cody Evans, 29, a drifter with no steady employment. The search of their room yielded a trove of damning evidence. A pair of muddy sneakers with the V-shaped tread, a perfect match to the print found at the crime scene, a 4-inch steel pipe with flakes of paint and a strange residue on it believed to be the murder weapon. They also found another unused burner SIM card, black ski masks, and a small notebook with scrawled addresses and phone numbers. In the interrogation room, both Bauer and Evans were initially silent. Their defiant posture showed a street-hardened familiarity with police procedure, but when Detective Corbin placed the muddy sneakers and the steel pipe on the table in front of them, Cody Evans's composure began to crack. He stared at the evidence, sweat beading on his forehead. Finally, unable to withstand the psychological pressure, Evans broke. He mumbled a single sentence, a sentence that blew the case wide open. "We weren't supposed to kill anyone. We were just hired to scare them." His confession confirmed Corbin's gut feeling. Behind these 2 thugs there was a mastermind, someone who had given the orders. Cody Evans, his emotional state now fragile, began to confess everything. He said he was just following Rick Bauer's lead. Bauer had told him about a job, a simple matter of gently resolving a family dispute for good money. Evans insisted repeatedly that they never intended to kill anyone. When the detective showed him a photograph of Jessica Vargas, Evans recognized her immediately. He confirmed she was the one who called Rick. Though he had never met her in person, Evans had overheard her voice on speakerphone, a distinct accent with very strict instructions. "There are old people and young children in the house, so don't hit them too hard. Just make them scared. Make them know their place. This detail was critical. It proved that the mastermind not only knew the Hayes family, but knew the intimate details of who lived in the house, down to their ages. The mastermind's rage was directed at a specific target, yet they seemingly wanted to spare the others. A deadly, flawed contradiction. Rick Bauer, though he remained silent, had a subtle, almost imperceptible reaction when Jessica Vargas's name was mentioned. A slight tightening of the jaw, a flicker in his eyes. It was a micro-expression that did not escape the notice of the experienced detectives. It was a silent confirmation of her involvement. The investigation into Jessica Vargas kicked into high gear, and her past revealed a shocking connection. Jessie had been in a serious relationship with Ethan Hayes, the eldest son. They had dated for 2 years, but the relationship was vehemently opposed by the Hayes family, especially by Eleanor. Eleanor had discovered that Jessie worked at a bar, a life she considered unsavory. Worse, Jessie had a minor police record for public disturbance from her younger years. Eleanor felt Jessie was not good enough for her son. Arthur, siding with his wife, had given Ethan an ultimatum. If he continued to see Jessie, he was no longer welcome in their home. The family's harsh opposition had caused Ethan to gradually pull away from Jessie. Suddenly, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The motive was not money. It was revenge. A deep, burning revenge born from humiliation and a profoundly wounded pride. Jessica Vargas, feeling insulted and rejected by the family of the man she loved, had hatched a plan to teach them a lesson. Her intimate knowledge of the house, the family's routine, and even the ages of the family members all stemmed from her past relationship with Ethan and the times she had visited the home. Corroborating evidence quickly mounted, building an ironclad case against Jessica Vargas. The burner phone used to contact Bauer and Evans was traced back to a small shop in Los Angeles, where the clerk identified a woman matching Jessie's description as the buyer. A forensic recovery of deleted text messages from Rick Bauer's phone uncovered a message sent from that same burner phone 30 minutes before the crew left for Oregon. The message was chillingly precise. Right address, right time. Remember, there are old people in the house. Don't hit too hard. Just scare them into knowing their place. That instruction, far from being a sign of mercy, was a damning indictment of Jessie's intimate knowledge of her victims. A financial transaction was also discovered. Jessie had transferred $500 to Cody Evans's e-wallet account on May 13th, with the note, "Down payment, see you this afternoon." She had promised them an additional $1,500 once the job was done. Jessica Vargas's phone remained off. She had vanished. A nationwide manhunt was initiated. The search for the mastermind lasted over a month. Finally, on June 20th, Jessie was arrested at a cheap, rundown motel in Reno, Nevada. She was living in squalor, her appearance gaunt and haggard. In the interrogation room, Jessie initially denied everything. She wept, claiming she knew nothing. But when the detectives laid out the crime scene photos on the table, the lifeless faces of the 5 victims, including an old man and 2 young boys, Jessica Vargas completely broke down. She let out a guttural sob and confessed her entire plan. Jessie admitted that she had asked a friend to connect her with someone who could teach the Hayes family a lesson. She only wanted to frighten them, to make them feel the same humiliation they had inflicted on her. She insisted over and over that she only wanted to scare them, and that she had explicitly warned her hired thugs not to harm the elderly and the children. She even claimed that Rick Bauer had told her they would only use a wooden stick. A pathetic, desperate lie. But the final piece of evidence silenced all of her denials. From Rick Bauer's phone, forensics had recovered a secret audio recording made after the murders. In the recording, Bauer's voice was cold and ruthless. "Someone died. The price just doubled." That sentence was what had sent Jessie into a panic, causing her to cut off all contact and flee. It was also irrefutable proof that she knew about the deaths but had chosen to run and hide rather than come forward.